Hi, I'm Adari P.T. Brown, here to talk to you about education reform. The reality is, when it comes to education reform, many people want to bicker and argue about, are the unions, our teachers' unions working, are they hurting our children, no child left behind, testing, funding, all these things that to me make no sense. It make no sense because this is the reality, people. Let's look at this. The only test that should matter is the ACT and the SAT. In the class of 2000, the class of 2009 last year, less than 25% of those who took either the ACT or the SAT were college ready. Less than 25%. Then, if you factor that into the matter of, if you factor into how many students are going to college that are taking developmental courses, then you begin to understand that we are at a point in our educational system where we have to change. Teachers like to argue during negotiations that they need smaller class sizes, they need this, they need better resources. Principals want to shout and scream about how teachers are listening to them. They don't get the choice to pick their own teachers, they don't get the choice to pick their own staff, yada yada yada. School boards want to bicker and fight about funding, want to bicker and fight about who's in this place, who's there. You know, it's so much red tape in this bureaucracy known as education, when it really shouldn't. The bottom line is this: education as we know it has to change. Has to change because we are failing too many children. Too many children are slipping through the gaps of the educational system daily. The fact that the United States of America is known as the greatest country in the world means nothing when our educational system sees thousands to millions of children drop out every year. That's just not talking about once they get to the 12th grade. I'm talking about from pre-K to the 12th grade. We see thousands to nearly millions of children drop out. But in this nation, we continue to build prisons. We build prisons like never before, but sometimes we put more investment into building a new prison than we put into investing in building a new school or giving schools better resources. Teachers union want to argue about better pay, smaller class size, and things of that nature. I'm not arguing that. Yes, teachers can be more effective if they did have smaller class sizes. But the reality is, the reason why we can't get smaller class sizes is not because our educational systems are too big. It's the fact of the matter, we are lumping kids into these buildings when we need to separate the kids who really want to learn from those who are preventing learning. Alternative schools need to be put on the table in every school district, and not just any old alternative school. We send kids to alternative schools because they're not being disciplined in regular school. They are not willing to be disciplined. So the alternative schools should be like boot camps. Boot camps that will reform these kids to be respectable young men and women and to respect not only themselves but the adults who are over them. And we should not just put any old principal over an alternative school. We should put principals who are willing to be hard on kids, who are willing to go to the max, and put teachers and security in those buildings who are willing to change the mindset of these students and change the lifestyles of them by going toe to toe with them. And we need parents who are willing to step up. It's easy for us to simply put all the blame on teachers and administrators and everybody else. But parents have to take responsibility as well. And students have to take responsibility. Students can't sit up here and talk about they're not learning if they're not complaining. If they're not complaining or doing things to make sure the administration and the teachers know that, hey, I'm not learning because X, Y, and Z is in this classroom disrupting you every day, so I feel like I'm going to cheat at 15, 20 minutes of my educational class time. These are things that need to change. Educational reform will not change overnight, but the reality is we need to put things in place that will make it change. Teachers' unions need to work to change the status quo. For far too long, teachers' unions and administrators and bureaucracies have stood in the way of real educational reform. People have got paid off the backs of our children, and we have not seen the reward of what they reap. That's why we need to invest in our youth like never before by changing the status quo. If we have to tear up teachers' contracts in order to get the best teachers and the brightest teachers in the classroom to teach our kids, then let's do it. If we have to tear up teachers' contracts and contracts with textbook companies and everyone else in order to get the right type of textbooks into our classroom, the right type of technology into our classroom in order to teach our kids what kids in China and everywhere else in the world are learning, then let's do it. Let's change the status quo, because it's a shame that last year's graduating class across America, less than 25% of them were college ready. Less than 25%. That is something that all of us should be thinking in our head. Every year we send kids off to college, but only less than 25% of them are college ready. But once we send them off to college, many of them are taking remedial courses. It's not because some of them probably can't take tests that well, but a lot of them are not learning the core essentials to what they need to know. We need to change the status quo. We need to change the mindset of education. We need to change it forever. And the reality is, rhetoric alone is not going to do it. Criticism is not going to do it. But what's going to do it is simply asking ourselves, teachers, principals, students, parents, what have we done to improve education? And what have we not done to improve education? And what can we do to improve it? Once we answer those three questions, then we can start writing policies that will transform education throughout the United States like never before. No Child Left Behind wasn't just underfunded. The policies were not as effective as we thought. You can't teach our kids just to take tests. It has to be something better than that. So as I talk to you about education reform, remember, we're in this together. This is not the bashing of teachers' unions. This is not the bashing of administrators. This is not the bashing of school boards. And this is not the bashing of politicians. This is not the bashing of parents or students. The reality is, this is holding all of us accountable. Because for far too long, we've been failing our education system in America. We've been failing future generations of Americans. We can't do that any longer. We must reform education. So 2010, make it no longer about us, but make it about the future. Let's change education to improve the United States educational perspective for not just today, not just tomorrow, but for long-term generations of Americans. Because everyone deserves education. Everyone deserves the best education that we can offer, and that's something we are not giving today's generation as well as future generations of Americans. I'm Hadari P.T. Brown, and this is my perspective.